Alright, so to mark the yahrzeit of Nosson Zal, Reb Nosson ben Reb Naftali Hertz Sternhartz Menemer of Rabbi Nachman's Talmud will learn, and it's also a Sarvatevis. Tomorrow we're fasting, so we will learn what Reb Nosson writes in Likkutei Halachos on the Indian of fasting. So Indian Arba'at Saimas Shemis Amnin Kol Churban Beis Hamikdash. The concept of the four fasts that we fast, that we observe through fasting to mourn for the destruction of the Holy Temple. Al-Pimaimer Bereshis L'Einei Kol Yisrael Likkutei Tinyana Siman Samech Zayin. Again, Reb Nosson Zal is basing his Torah on Reb Nachman's Torah, but we'll leave that. It's Reb Nachman talks about this one. I do remember learning, but I don't remember what it says. Comparing the first word of the Torah, Bereshis, and the last three words of the Torah, L'Einei Kol Yisrael. Bereshis meaning in the beginning, and L'Einei Kol Yisrael meaning in the eyes of all Israel. So Reb Nachman has a Torah on that, but again, I don't recall it offhand. So let's learn what Reb Nosson Zal has to say about it. V'klal, general idea. Kitzadik ha'emes hu ha'chein v'ha'pe'er v'yofi shel kol olam v'chinas Yosef. It's connected to Heintige Sedra also. In the past few weeks, we've been learning about Yosef and Tzadik. General idea is the true tzaddik is the charm, the grace, and the beauty of the entire world. This is the concept of Yosef and Tzaddik, of the saintly son of Jacob. Joseph was the archetype of the tzaddik, of Midas Yesod. Bechinas Vayehi Yosef Yefei Toyer V'Yefei Mar'eh. This is the concept that we read a few weeks ago, that it says in Joseph, in the book of Genesis, and Joseph was of beautiful form and beautiful to look at. Val Yoda Yecholim L'Stakel Ba'atzmai B'Cholamida Shaborin Me'arba'a Yesoides Eichu Oichis B'Hem. So through the tzaddik, through the true saint, it is possible for a person to look at himself with all of the concepts, with all of the attributes which come from the four fundamental elements, as is known in Western world. Earth, wind, fire, and water are the four fundamental elements in classical literature, in classical mythos. And what Reb Nosson Zal is saying is that through looking at the tzaddik, one can look at himself and find how you yourself are connected to these four fundamental elements. Ki kol arba yesodes nimshachim tzaddik shu bechinas yesod pashut. The reason for this is because all of the four elements are drawn from the saint, from the tzaddik, which is the concept of Yesod, the simple concept of Yesod, of the foundation. And we can say this in two ways. One way, maybe the more Kabbalistic way, is that God's energy comes down through the spheres, and so the penultimate sphere is Yesod, and then finally Malchus. And so it's drawn through Yesod into Malchus. But then also that would be in the Kabbalistic sense. But Reb Nosson specifically here says Bechinas Yesod HaPashut, meaning the simple concept of Yesod, which means a foundation, because these four elements are fundamentals, right? That's why they're called Arba Yesodos. It's the concept of Yesoid. They are the four fundamental elements and the four foundational elements, the four foundations. And so it's very simple. The word Yesod is there. And this is Bechinas Tzadik Yesod Olam. That's the concept that we find in the book of Proverbs, that the righteous is the foundation of the world. The saint is the foundation of the world. Bechinas v'nahar yotze me'aden lahashkois. This is also the concept of what it says in Genesis, that the river went out from Eden to water the garden. V'hoyel arba'a roshim. And it became divided into four heads. Kishmoi meshutav b'shmeinu. This is because his name is partnered up with our name. V'shem Hashem u'bechinas arba'isius. And of course, God's name is the tetragrammaton, the four-letter name. Misham nishtalshlin arba'a yesodos. And so from the four letters of God's name, from the river that comes out of Eden to water the garden, that's divided into four heads. That from there comes down through the chain of the four fundamental elements, the four concepts of Yesod. But they first have to be four brains. That's the concept of the three colors of the eye and the apple of the eye. Meaning, you have the white, and then the the white of the eye, and the color of the eye, the black of the eye, and the apple of the eye. That's what illuminates the temple. And these are all the concepts of the illumination of the luminaries, of the sun and the moon and the stars. When the temple was destroyed, this is the concept of that the luminaries of light were removed. So once the supernal heavenly luminaries were removed, so then the power of fire, God forbid, the light of fire which comes from above, that they set down fire, that becomes stronger. And that's the concept of that fire was thrown down into Zion, and it ate up its yesoides, it ate up its foundations. So again, this word yesoid, which we find now in the scriptural reference that we have here. Can't see the turns over here because this guy doesn't have his lights on. Usually Mr. Liff here, he has the lights on. He should be well. He's like 100 years old, I think. Must be in Florida or something. Alright. Because through the destruction of the temple, Bechinas Istalkus Ma'orior, which is the concept of the removal of the luminaries, this Gabru Bechinas Ma'oreish. Then, since the luminaries, the heavenly luminaries, were weakened, it strengthened the light of the fire. V'al Yedezen if Gomim Kol Arba Yesoides, and through this, all the four fundamental elements are damaged. Kitikun Kol Arba Yesoides. So therefore, the rectification for the four fundamental elements, Shehem Klalamidas, which are the generalities of the attributes, Heim Al Yedei Bechinas Ma'arior, Shnim Shochen Me'et Tzadik. They are the concept of the light of the luminaries, which are drawn from the tzaddik, from the saint, from the righteous person, Bechina Shabbos. And that comes from this concept of the Sabbath, Shem Hayu Me'irim B'Beis HaMikdash. And that is what was illuminating in the temple, Ayin Shem Kol Zeh Heitev. And Reb Nosson Zal says we should look at what Reb Nachman says in Likkutei Moran, and in order to understand this well. But we're almost home, we don't have time. I want to finish this Torah. And for this reason, when a tzaddik is removed, when a tzaddik leaves this world, it's more difficult to the world than the destruction of the temple. Because the main light of the luminaries comes from the tzaddik, Shabbos, which is the concept of the Sabbath, Shemeir Beis HaMikdash, which illuminates the temple. And that's why the sages say in the Talmud, anyone who has intelligence, it's as if who has knowledge, it's as if he built a temple in his days. When a person has knowledge, and knowledge means an intimate connection. Knowledge is the brain. That's the concept of the righteous person of the generation, which is the brain of the generation. That the tzaddik is worthy to knowledge and to a brain, which is the concept of the light of the luminaries. Since the whole concept of the Beis HaMikdash is Or Shel Olam, it's the light of the world, when the tzaddik is illuminated with the light of wisdom, which is the true light, that is as if the temple was built in his day. Because the main existence and the building of and existence of the temple, that's through knowledge and the brains. That's the concept of the light of the luminaries. That is what is illuminating the temple, like we said above. And therefore that is the concept of the 4 fasts which we need to fast to mourn for the destruction of the temple, because the destruction of the temple is the concept of the removal and the weakening of the light of the world, like we said above. Because the main way that a person eats in holiness is through the light of the luminaries, and that comes from the true saint. Through the true tzaddik, because through the tzaddik we're rectifying and filtering all of the 4 fundamental elements, like we said above. Because every food has these 4 fundamental elements in them, like was known. So therefore they are the life force of the body. And the body itself also is made from these 4 fundamental elements. And therefore when the light of the luminaries is illuminated through the tzaddik, through the saint, which is the concept of the building of the temple, through this we rectify all of the 4 elements, like we said above. Therefore, when we eat in holiness, like it says in the scripture, I believe it's in Proverbs, that the saint eats to satisfy his soul, because these fundamental elements are rectified and are filtered through the tzaddik canal, like we said above. Ozheim nechlalim b'kedusha b'shorsham b'seich yisoid pashat. So then they are included in holiness in their root through the simple concept of Yesod, meaning the foundation. And then all of the four fundamental elements are included in the concept of the light of the luminaries, which is the concept of the brain, canal, which is the concept of the light of the righteous saint, like what you said above. So therefore, when a person eats in holiness, that's for his soul. Because the soul is the concept of the brains. Bechinas ma'areor, which is the concept of the light of the luminaries. Bechinas nishma shakai is the concept of the soul of the Almighty. Tevinem will give them understanding and not haguf hu bechinas ma'areish. But the body is the concept of the light of fire. Because fire is the first of the four elements. And all of the all of the taivas, all of the lusts, the desires of the body come from the fire and from the warmth of the body. And that's where all the lusts come from. So therefore, the main rectification of eating in holiness, that comes from the true tzaddik, the true saint shall al yedei tzaddik emes al yadoinus taknin kol arba yisoidus, because through such a tzaddik we're rectifying all of the four fundamental elements. The chlolim b'shorsham, and they're included in their roots, b'chinas ma'areor, which is the concept of the light of the illuminations of the luminaries. B'chinas moichin, it's the concept of the brain. Then such a person is eating for his soul. Shikamkin b'chinas moichin, it's also the concept of the brains. B'chinas ma'areor, it's the concept of the light of the luminaries. V'zeh b'chinas tzadik oichel l'seivanavshe v'chulu kanal. That's the concept of what it said, that the tzaddik, that the righteous saint eats in order to satisfy his soul, like we said above. Valkein kol shpuas v'kol svia nimshach me'et tzaddik hador. So therefore, all of the hashpuas, all of the influences, and all of the satisfaction that can exist in the world, that comes from the tzaddik hador, that comes from the righteous person of the generation, the saint of the generation. Bechinas Yosef, the concept of Yosef. I'm going to light a candle for Nosson, Lil Nishrat of Nosson, Ben Reb Naftali, Hertz, Sternhartz, Meir Nemar of Schusigel and Chlein. Shehu bechinas nahar yoytze me'eden lahashkos. That's the concept of the river that comes from Eden in order to give water to the garden. Because all these concepts come from the four fundamental elements, which all are drawn from the tzaddik, from the saint canal, like we said above. Shehu bechinas v'nar yoytze me'eden lahashkos is a gon canal. That's the concept, like we mentioned above, of in the river that comes out from Eden to water the garden. Ki tzaddik mashka marves aretz, because the tzaddik gives water, it waters the land. Shal yedei zenim shachim kol hashpuas, and through this all of the influences come. Ki kol geshem u'matu yerdim al yedei tzaddik, all the rain and the all comes down from the tzaddik. Because we see in the book of Genesis that the Lord did not cause it to rain on the land, because the man was not there to work the land. And Rashi says it's because Adam wasn't there yet to pray for rain, and that the rain comes because of the human prayers, Shul Tzaddik, because Adam Rishon was the tzaddik, Adam was the saint. Al Yadoi Nimshach Kol Amater Lahashkos El Kol Pnei Odama. That through him it was drawn down all of the rain to water all the face of the earth. That's the concept of the river coming from Eden, in order to give to water the land. And Mishami Pared, and from there it divided into 4 heads. Al Keinim Shochim Kol Ashpuas Al Yedei Tzaddik. Therefore, it's drawn down all of the influences through the righteous person. That's when it says that Joseph gave food to his father and to his brothers. Same thing, the whole earth came to Egypt, to Joseph, to break bread for them, to give them food. Joseph was the ruler. Joseph was the one who divided up the food for everybody. Joseph Tzaddik Ador. Joseph was the ruler. Joseph was the Yosef Tzaddik. He was the saint of the generation. From him is drawn down all of the 4 fundamental elements. Roish biased. He's the head of the house. As Reb Nachman mentions in that Maimer. That is the river that comes out from Eden. Lahashkos, to water the garden. He is the one who's feeding everybody. Because from him is drawn out all of the satisfaction, and all of the influences. Because all of these are included in the 4 fundamental elements. And these are drawn from the tzaddik, like we said there. That's why it's such a big mitzvah to eat on the Sabbath. As it says in the book of Exodus, eat today because today is the Sabbath today is the day of the Lord. Because on Shabbos, it's illuminating the light of the luminaries, like we said above. And then on the Sabbath is specifically eating in holiness, like we said above. Therefore, it's a mitzvah to eat on Shabbos. On the Sabbath, and that's what it means that the Torah gave a reason to eat on the Sabbath, because the Sabbath is the concept of the light of the luminaries. That's what it says, eat today, because the Sabbath is the day of the Lord. See that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. It says specifically, look, see with your eyes. How do you see? From light. The light is how you see. And so that's why it specifically says, see the Sabbath. That's the concept of sight, of being able to see. That's the concept of the 3 colors of the eyes and the apple of the eye. From Pasuk, like Reb Nachman says on that pasuk that we mentioned before, on that verse in Scripture, so therefore we see scripturally that the Sabbath is the concept of look and see, which is the concept of the light of luminaries. Therefore eat today, because for this reason it's a mitzvah to eat on Shabbos, because you're eating in holiness when the light of the luminaries is shining. Shehem Bechinas Shabbos is the concept of the Sabbath. Bechinas Tzaddik Emes, the concept of the true Tzaddik, the true saint. Bechinas Beis HaMikdash, it's the concept of the holy temple, canal, like we said above. V'alkein, therefore, Kshenechrev Beis HaMikdash, once the temple was destroyed in the Stalka Marior, and the light of the luminaries was weakened, goes through this anis arbatzoimus. That's why the sages enacted that we have to fast 4 fast days. Because now that the light of the luminaries was diminished through the destruction of the holy temple, it's very difficult to eat in holiness. Because there's the overpowering of the 4 elements not in the spiritual elements, but in the physical elements. That's the concept of the light of fire, as we said above. Because the light of the luminaries was weakened, like we said above. Therefore, we have to fast 4 fast days in order to weaken the 4 fundamental elements. And we're worthy that through the fasting we return and illuminate this concept of the light of the luminaries, which is the concept of the brain. Because through fasting, the brain is fed first when we break the fast. And not only that, but while we're fasting, the food is leaving our body, so the body has to send the food to the brain. Whatever energy is left in the body from the day before, it all has to go to the brain. And that gives the brain the power to conquer the body. So therefore, the brain, which is the symbol, is the archetype of the Moreh Or, of the light of the luminaries, is conquering and overpowering the archetype of the light of fire. And once that light is shining, of the light of the luminaries, then we don't need to fast anymore. Because that eating itself is included in the concept of the light of the fire. And then it's just the opposite. Then the light of the luminaries is given even more power. The concept that the saint eats in order for the satisfaction of his soul. Because when one eats in holiness, then he is filtering the concept of the light of the luminaries. As it says by Jonathan in the book of Samuel, there's a story in the book of Samuel that King Saul made a decree that everyone should fast. And Jonathan, his son, was unaware of this decree, and he was very hungry, and he had his walking stick, and he put it in some honey that he found on the ground, and he tasted a little bit of the honey. And they wanted to punish Jonathan, perhaps with the death penalty, because it was Mord B'Malchus, because he was rebelling against the king by eating when the king declared the fast. However, it says that his eyes were illuminated because he tasted this little bit of honey. But nowadays, because the temple was destroyed and the light of luminaries is weakened, therefore we are required to fast these 4 fast days. Then we weaken the materialistic power of the 4 elements through the fast. Kemuva b'makom acher. That is what is brought in another place. Was yichom lachsav lizkos v'chinas mara orshem v'chinas moichin kanal. And then we're able to return and to be worthy to the concept of the light of the luminaries, which is the concept of the brain, as we said above. Ki kolam is abel Yerushalayim zeicha v'roya b'simchasa. So Rav Nosson Zal brings, the Bali Lula brings the Gemara in Tainus, and the people who learned the Daf Yomi, I don't learn Daf Yomi, but used to sometimes. But the people who learned the Daf Yomi, they just finished the Gemara Tainus, which ends off with this, that anyone who mourns over Jerusalem is worthy to see its joy. It doesn't say he will be worthy. It says so in the present tense, that you are worthy while you are mourning for Jerusalem, that you see the joy at that moment while you are mourning. So therefore, through observing a fast and mourning over the destruction of the temple, then we are worthy to the concept of the building of the temple, because we're worthy to return to this concept of the light of the luminaries, which is the concept of the temple, as the prophet says in the scripture, and to give to those who mourn over Zion glory in place of ashes, to take those letters of Afer, which is ashes, and move them around to Pe'er, to glory. Rav Nosson Zal says that Rav Nachman Schusi Galenu mentions this in the same mimer that he quoted above, and again we don't have time. We want to get through this mimer because Rav Nosson is the Balei Lula. That's the concept of what it says in the book of Proverbs, that the light of the eyes brings joy to the heart. And through the light of the eyes, which is the concept of the light of the luminaries, through this we bring joy to the heart. This is the concept of what I think it's in Isaiah, that it says, rejoice with her, rejoice all those who are mourning for her. Because when you mourn for the destruction of the temple, then you are worthy to the concept of the light of luminaries. That's the concept of joy, as we said above. That is why anytime there's some kind of a sorrow, it should never come such sorrow. But historically, whenever such a thing happened, our sages would establish and decree a fast day, whether an annual fast day like we have to mourn for the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, or even if there's a drought, chas v'shalom, or some other thing to be worried about, we would fast. What does that accomplish, fasting? This is the reason to fast is because all suffering comes from the concept of the light of fire. From the light of the fire comes all of the suffering. May the merciful Lord save us, as is known. Therefore, the sages teach that from the day that the temple was destroyed, there's no day that the curse of that day is not greater than the curse of the previous day. As our sages taught in the Talmud, because from the day that the temple was destroyed and weakened the light of the luminaries, and it gave more power to the light of the fire, may the merciful God rescue us from such things. That's where all of the suffering comes from. May the merciful Lord save us from any suffering. And that is why we have to fast. Through this we weaken the power of the light of the fire canal, as we said above. And we give more power to the light of the luminary canal, which is the concept of the brain, as we said above. That's why the main reason why there would be fasting, other than to mourn for the temple, if there was a a fast that was decreed one day would be for, and like we learned in the Gemara Tainas, would be for a drought. Because rain comes from the tzaddik, which is the concept of the river that comes from Eden, like we said above. Canal. That's the concept of the light of luminaries, as we said above. Therefore, if God forbid there's a drought, we need to fast harbe a lot, in order to restore the concept of the light of luminaries, Shem Haaretz Tzaddik, which is the illumination of the righteous saints, because from there comes all the blessings and all the influence of goodness and the outpouring. Shehem bechinas geshomim. That's the concept of rain. Bechinas v'nar yotzi me'eden lahashkes esagan. That's the concept of the river that comes from Eden to give water to the garden canal, as we said above. All right. So I'll call you Amen. Thank you for learning with us. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment. We'll see you later.